All right. Hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions are still on somewhat of a staggered return, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster Season 6, intriguing interviews with creative minds. Well, if you're a fan of wide-ranging science fiction melding military, sci-fi, space opera, humor, and AI, then you've come to the right place, because tonight on our show, we have Dennis Taylor, a retired computer programmer turned New York Times best-selling and award-winning author of We Are Legion, We Are Bob, and the ongoing Bobbyverse series. Welcome, Dennis.
Hi.
All right, good to see you. Okay, for just a heads up to the folks at home, feel free to send me notes or questions you have for me or Dennis in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. Okay, as we always do, we'll start at the beginning. Dennis, so where were you born and where'd you grow up?
Born in Ontario, but I've spent most of my life in BC, specifically the Lower Mainland, Coquitlam area. A little bit of branching out. When you're young and single, of course, you move every 6 months, but nothing major.
So just for those who don't know our Canadian geography, British Columbia is where geographically?
West Coast.
West Coast. All right. Okay. So when you were growing up, do you have brothers, sisters, or was it just you? Or
I am an only child, but I spent a significant amount of time in the foster system, so I had brothers and sisters that came and went, if you will.
Okay. So if you don't mind me asking, so what was that like for you? Was it? I mean, some folks don't do so well, some do pretty well. Like, how did it go for you?
It went pretty well, actually. I've seen the foster system portrayed on a lot of TV shows, and I've never seen anything like that. And maybe it's just because it's the Canadian system. Maybe it's because it's the BC system. I don't know, but it's not like what you see on TV.
So were you predominantly in one home? Were you in multiple? How did that work?
No group homes. I moved around a couple of individual homes, but no group homes. That's probably the difference. I think group homes are probably a lot worse.
So when that happened, so now as you got into adulthood, did you stay in touch with those foster parents, or did you lose touch? How does that work?
It's up to the individual. In my case, I stayed in touch.
Okay. So how did you feel? So what is that, sort of moving around, having having these surrogate families throughout the course of your life? How does that shape the way you form relationships and you view other people?
I think you have a tendency to look on relationships as potentially transitory. Potentially, I say, because it's still nice to have long-term and permanent relationships. I've been married for more than 30 years, and I'm quite happy with that. But I never got too attached to one set of foster parents. So
when you shift around, what are the factors that go into why you would stay or shift? Like, how does that work?
It could be anything. It could be incompatibility. It could be the foster parents decide they don't want a foster parent anymore. It could be that your social worker decides that they have a better environment for you. Reasons are legion.
So as a kid, how does that impact so did you kind of move around essentially in the same region, or were you kind of disparate in where you were living?
No, same region, Coquitlam area, all the way.
Did you so how was it then? So how does it like go with friendships? Do you lose them when you move, or were you close enough where you could keep up with the same friends, or how does that work?
You can maintain friendships. I didn't. Of course, I'm an introvert. I've always been a bit of a loner. I've had a few close friends, and that's about it. So it wasn't as big of an uprooting as it might be for some people.
Huh. Okay. So being the fact that you moved around, a bunch of times throughout your childhood, and you are by nature sort of more introverted. So what kept you busy? Like, what did you do?
Reading science fiction. I started reading science fiction in grade 5. The first book I read was The Lost Planet by Angus McVicker, and it hooked me. It just absolutely instantly hooked me. I went looking for the sequels, found 3 out of 5. And then I just started digging around for more science fiction. I probably spent most of high school in the library.
Huh. So were you reading predominantly, Canadian writers, American writers, both?
Whatever's available.
Whatever was available. So what did you just read? Were you also, did you like, watching movies and sci-fi TV, or was it all books?
Oh no, it was anything I could get my hands on. All the old black and white, B-movie schlock, The Blob, Forbidden Planet, which is not schlock.
Right.
Movies, books, comic books, some fantasy, anything I could get a hold of. I was just an absolutely dedicated reader and I guess consumer of science fiction and fantasy.
So especially when you're a kid and we tend to be more open to these kind of other worlds, other places. What was the appeal for you, especially in those years? That what spoke to you about, you pick up these science fiction stories that take you to other places, or what was it about it that you just said, yep, I identify, that's where I want to be?
Well, it wasn't a case of that's what I want to be, because I never thought of myself as potentially an author. I was just a reader, and I loved science fiction because it sparked the imagination. It was different. I hate to pick on other genres, so take these examples as illustrative rather than critical. But if you read an Agatha Christie mystery or something like that, it's pretty much always a mystery, right? Somebody dies, the detective or the police come in, they investigate, eventually they find the murderer. It's a lot of the same. But you get into science fiction and suddenly, maybe the murderer is an alien. Like the Larry Niven Gill the Arm short stories, which were mostly, police procedurals, except in a science fiction setting. You could have really unexpected stuff happening.
So was there a type of, science fiction is a broad term. It's a wide spectrum, right? There's hard sci-fi, there's softer stuff, there's time travel, space opera, military sci-fi, alternate parallel universes. Was there a type of sci-fi that you gravitated towards more, or was it just yes to all?
Well, it was yes to all, but I prefer hard science fiction, space opera, technologically based, let's say, as opposed to soft or sociologically based. 1984, technically that's science fiction. Well, it was science fiction. Now it's historical fact. But at the time, it would have been considered science fiction, but it was sociological. It was all about politics and and individual reactions to their environment. That didn't attract me quite so much, and I actually am a lot more attracted to that type of thing now that I can start to identify with all the backstories and with how the characters react to that.
Okay. So did you, when you were reading, when you were watching, were you, a Star Wars and a Star Trek guy, or did neither or both? Was that not your thing, or?
Star Trek more than Star Wars. I probably just received 1,500 threats from the Star Wars fans. But I definitely liked Star Trek more. Star Wars has been referred to as science fantasy or space fantasy.
Right.
They play fast and loose with the rules and distances or whatever they need to be at the time. Although the Chris Pine's Star Trek went that way a little bit too, which I was a little surprised about. But for the most part, I find Star Trek to be a lot more science fiction and less science fantasy.
Right. So, so when you read horror sci-fi, were you into like, like Philip K. Dick, or even later William Gibson? Kind of more in that cyberpunk space, or is that sort of outside kind of what you like?
I basically read, like I say, whatever I could get my hands on. I've read probably most authors that you can name, at least one book or one story. If I really like them, I go looking for more of their books. For instance, Alan Dean Foster, Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov. I've written pretty much everything, or I've read everything they've written at one point or another. Some authors I like less than others. I was never much of a fan of Ray Bradbury. As Nelson says in The Simpsons, I'm aware of his work.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, he was a little bit more, it was a little bit more social commentary than it was,
yeah, and very much fantasy.
Right. All right, fair enough.
There were no constraints on what could happen in the story.
All right, so you like the so that kind of leads me to one of my next questions. So, you became a computer programmer. So was that something that, certainly computers, really kind of changed significantly in the last 30 years or so, but were you always into computers, or did you come to that a little bit later in life?
Well, I got into computers in the early days. TRS-80 Model 1 Level 2 computer was my first computer. It was just after they started actually having computers with keyboards and monitors. Up till that time, people were still breadboarding them and inputting with switches and stuff like that with the hobby computers. But they finally reached the point where they were an interactive device, and that's when I got interested.
I hate to interrupt, but your camera's sort of like wobbling back and forth.
Oh, sorry, I've got it on my knee.
Okay, sorry.
And yeah,
there we go.
There.
Okay. All right. So
I'll try not to fidget.
Okay. So computers.
Yeah. Anyway, a friend and I went halfers on a TRS-80 computer, and it was just a case of no looking back after that. At that time, they didn't have much in the way of computer degrees, or the computer degrees that they did have, people came out after having worked on IBM 360s and stuff like that, batch processing and everything. So wow, we got some noise outside. Those kind of degrees weren't really much use for the mini and microcomputer emerging technologies. So essentially, if you knew which end of a keyboard was up, you could get a job in the industry. So I got a job in the industry.
So I'm just curious. So, and just bear with me for a minute. So you were instantly attracted to science fiction, and you were instantly attracted to computers. I see sort of maybe there's a correlation, because you like hard sci-fi, and the hard sci-fi, which adheres more to science, right? And there are rules and there's structure. And computer coding, I know a lot of coders, right? It's its own language, which has its own set of rules, and it does what it's supposed to do. It doesn't just sort of decide, oh, well, I know I can do this program, but I'm also going to allow you to sort of time travel. It doesn't really work that way, right? Is there right? Is that fair? Do you like that sort of connective tissue there?
Yeah, you put it that way, I'm sounding a lot like Sheldon Cooper, which maybe not so far off, actually. Yeah, I do. Shifting again. Sorry. I do like structure, but I also tend to get enthusiastic about things when I like something. I really like it, and I get really into it. And if, as a matter of fact, a friend of mine has commented on that. He says I should take up golf. And I said, no, I don't need another time suck in my life.
Right, right. So let me ask you, and I don't know if maybe you've thought about this, maybe you haven't, and I don't know if I'm off base or not, but I'm just sort of thinking about, so your early years, from a personal standpoint, you didn't have a lot of consistency, right? You moved around a bit. Do you think there's a correlation between, not having that consistency where there are rules to being attracted to, like computers, you have control. There are rules, there's structure, and you get to tell it what to do. Do you think there's anything there?
It could have been the case for somebody else in those situations, but I don't think it's the case in my situation, because I am by nature a math and science nerd, and always have been.
Right.
So I think even if I'd grown up in a normal household, as soon as you introduced me to math and science and stuff like that, I'd have been all in.
Right. So in a way, computers are your people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It is exactly what you say. It's a structured discipline with rules and processes, procedures, and it's like building blocks. It's like you take these rules and you can build something from them.
So certainly computer programming has expanded exponentially in the last several decades, and in particular with AI is altering the trajectory of mankind. So from your vantage point, having been inside the computer world for decades, what do you foresee unfolding in regards to AI within our lifetime?
Well, I think within our lifetime, they'll eventually achieve AI, at least limited AI, possibly what I call in my book zombie AI. No personal desires, no personal goals, but an ability to think in generalized terms and absorb knowledge. And for AI, that's the basic that you need. An AI needs to be able to take knowledge that's given to it, integrate it into a worldview, and use that worldview to form conclusions.
Okay, so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that theme in just a little bit, because I think you know where we're going, but I want to touch on some other things, and we're going to come back to that. So, all right, so let's just shift gears just a little. So you also, in addition to being a science and math geek, as you say, you seem to enjoy the outdoors, snowboarding, mountain biking, running, which is completely the opposite. I have many friends who are snowboarders. Do you do moguls, freestyle? Like, what's your favorite way to board?
I am currently working on moguls. I'm good with medium and low to medium moguls, but not too steep, and certainly not moguls that are taller than me. But the moguls on Whistler are pretty good. You can find fields of all sizes. I also like doing long swooping carves on piste. I do not like tree riding.
Tree riding, what's that?
Riding through trees, in and out through a glade.
Right.
The downsides are just too significant.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah.
Look what happened to Sonny Bono, right? I mean, he wasn't on a board, but still.
No, yeah, that's true. And there are a couple of others who died the same way or in very similar ways. So yeah, I'm going to avoid glades.
All right. So, so where are your favorite runs?
Right now on Whistler, this year I'm spending most of my season at Whistler. I've spent most of my days around the Family Bowl. That's the roundhouse on Whistler Mountain. Okay. I branch out a little bit here and there down the Red Chair. And I went down to Creekside yesterday, and boy, was that a mistake. Icy chunder all the way down and thick fog. So I was terrified.
So I have to ask, because I've had a bad back for 20 years, and I'm constantly fighting through it. Like, snowboarding is not, that's not a gentle sport. How do you physically, how do you hold up?
I've been pretty active, I think, most of my life. I spent a lot of time in the gym weightlifting for years, so I think my bones are solid enough to handle most things. Plus, let's face it, I got to stop doing that, or I got to move this thing. I'm a cautious individual by nature. I don't just, oh, look, a cliff, let me huck myself off of it.
Right.
I will examine the run. I'll go down slowly. I'll take a look at it from angles before I start charging. I don't just blindly throw myself off of anything.
So you do recon.
Yep.
All right, fair enough. All right, so let's shift a bit and let's get to the heart of it. So you obviously you clack the keys, you tell your tales. So when did you first start getting serious about writing?
Well, getting serious was a process. I know when I started writing, it was the summer of 2014. I just basically, my wife challenged me on something, and I started writing Outland. And, I got it finished in 3 or 4 months. Tried querying it to agents and got crickets, honestly. Excuse me. So I self-published in January of 2015, and I made coffee money. Even Starbucks coffee money, which is a lot more. And then I started writing Legion, and I started querying that around, and I got a response from Ethan Ellenberg on, well, he was like the second person that I queried, and bang, right? Once you got an agent, things change completely. It's not a hobby anymore.
Right. So for those who haven't, had a chance to dive into to your We Are Bob series, give us the setup here. What are we? And this is going to, and for the folks who are watching, this is going to tie back to what we were discussing just a little while ago about computers and AI.
Right. Well, the setup of the series is a guy named Bob Johansson. I want to say Johansson, but that's the Martian, so you got to be careful about that.
Okay.
Bob Johansson, who is a computer and engineering nerd, strangely enough, purely by coincidence, who signs up for one of these cryogenic services that freezes you after death, so that you can be revived when technology is advanced to the point where they can cure you. And he inevitably dies, gets run over by a car like the same day. Massive irony, right?
Yes.
And he wakes up 100 years later, and things are not quite as planned. Rather than being a revived corpsicle, he is an image of his personality, I guess you would say, scanned into a computer. So he's basically, he's not an AI, because it's not quite the right term. I use the term replicant in the book, but basically he is a recording of a human being running in emulation on a computer. He's got all his memories, he's got all his original personality quirks, all his desires. He just doesn't have arms and legs or a body or any organic parts. And the idea is that he's been revived in order to be placed into a von Neumann probe and sent off to the stars to find habitable worlds for Earth people. And then hilarity ensues.
That's right. So I'm halfway through the first book. It's on my nightstand. Now, what I found interesting as I was reading it is that it, in its own way, it's the evolution of Bob is earned, right? It's not like, he shows up, he's like, hey, I signed up for the cryo thing, whammo, I wake up and now I'm this computerized version of myself, and then he's off and running. There's a lot of experimentation. He tries this. Oh, that didn't work. I tried this. Oh, that didn't work. I tried over and over and over and over and over. Like just kind of doing it again and again and again until it starts to like figure out, oh, wait, oh, I can do this. Oh, wait, oh, I can have access to, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And then, oh, wait. And then once we get the, as the reader, we get to follow him in his time, watching him experiment, and fail and succeed and learn and grow and try again. So we're kind of inching along. It's not like you say, well, 10 years later, now I can, you know, I can control anything I want. We get to go through the stages of it. So it felt very much like, you know, in essence, like snapshots of being a computer programmer who you write the code, you see how it works. Well, it does, it doesn't, you tweak this. All right, I got to fix this, or maybe I got to start over, and you various iterations of that program. So how much for you was it to sort of bringing your computer programmer self into this sci-fi epic?
Well, I mean, I did bring my computer programming knowledge into it, but I think, I don't have any actual statistics to back this up, but I believe that most writers write the kind of stories that they would like to read and that perhaps they haven't found yet. So I'm the kind of person who likes to read stories where somebody works through things to achieve an end. The book 1632 by Eric Flint, where an entire town gets thrown back 300 or 400 years into the middle of the 100 Years' War, and they have to, you know, battle their way into society. That's one of my favorite books. The Martian is one of my favorite books. They're all books where somebody's presented with a problem, they work their way through it. They, in The Martian's case, you know, they do the science, they work the problem.
So,
and that's what Bob does. He works the problem.
So in your series, you know, what Bob does is ultimately he starts sort of making copies of himself, and then there are different personalities that are sort of shades of the original, right? So they all have their own little personality. They're Bob, but they're not Bob. They're, you know, this one's a little snarkier, this one's a little bit more serious, this one, you know, they start the versions of himself. It's not just an exact replica. It's they're the same, but they're not the same. They kind of start to grow there. Was that something that was that purely done just out of just for the sake of being able to give the different Bobs, in essence, personalities, or does it kind of just become a natural extension of every time you sort of make a new version of something, it inevitably isn't going to be exactly the same?
Well, originally it was just a way to create some tension in the book. We Are Legion actually went through a few iterations before it finally got to the published version. I had some you know, feedback from my agent. I had some feedback from my editor. Made some changes, and one of the things that I added was differences between Bobs, just to, you know, just they had to butt heads, at least some, because 90% of, well, 90 is probably a high number, but a very significant percentage of the Bobiverse books is Bob's interacting. And if they always agree on everything and can read each other's minds, you got nothing.
Right. So if go ahead.
And I was going to say the whole VR thing also grew out of that requirement, because originally he was just a talking head, not even a talking head, just a talking voice.
Right.
And that wouldn't have been very interesting. So I added the VR, and now all of a sudden the Bobs can do whatever they want, be whatever they want, have whatever environment they want. And it just adds things like the baseball games in the pub and stuff like that.
I found that it was, what I found really kind of fascinating about it is that, you know, rather than just sort of like, let's, for example, you know, the classic, you know, going back to Hal, you know, to 2000, you know, to 2001, you know, he was this very sort of, you know, from our perspective, this sort of creepy, cold creature, you know, technological creature, whereas the various iterations of Bob's were quirky, and they all had their own kind of, you know, stuff to the table. So when the VR kind of came in, and I think that there was the cat, right? Am I remembering that correctly? The cat comes in, and then you have the different Bobs. And now, if I'm recalling correctly, there's a bunch of Star Trek references in there, correct?
Oh yeah, way too many Star Trek references.
Yes.
And a few Star Wars references.
Yes.
Guppy is Admiral Akbar.
So let me ask, so all in, how many books are in the Bobbyverse?
There are 4 right now.
Are you plans to do more?
The next book, the one that I'm just about to start work on, is going to be number 5. I just sent Earthside off to the editor. That's the sequel to Outland. And now I'm contractually obligated, among other things, to put out a Bob book.
Do you have intention to sort of just keep going indefinitely? Do you have an end game in mind?
I do have an end game in mind, but it's not. It doesn't have a specific time or place.
Okay.
So I'm going to keep writing Bob books as long as I keep having ideas and as long as people keep getting interested or stay interested. And if it starts to feel like it's starting to flag, then yeah, I'll wrap it up.
So within the Bobbyverse, there's various elements of sci-fi in there, right? There is space opera, there's military sci-fi, there's certainly humor in there. You know, do you think that all the sci-fi that you read throughout your lifetime, did all that kind of, you soak it up through osmosis, did it sort of just filter its way back into the series? Or did you specifically, as you were saying, you write the book that you want to read? Is this that you wanted this sort of, amalgam of subgenres under one roof?
I wrote We Are Legion as a reaction to A World Out of Time by Larry Niven. Larry Niven, by the way, is one of my favorite authors, and I also have read absolutely everything that he's written. He wrote A World Out of Time early on, and it's about a guy who becomes a corpuscle, gets revived, and gets put in a ramjet and sent off to the universe to look for planets. But the difference is that he's not a computer program; he's a live person. There were certain things about A World Out of Time that I wish he'd done differently. And that's not intended as a criticism. Again, Larry Niven was writing the book that he wanted to read, but the book that I wanted to read was a little different.
Right.
So when I started writing, it went in the direction that I would want it to go.
All right, fair enough. So certainly it sounds like, Niven really not only influenced you, but really gave you almost a jumping off point for Bob. Were there any other authors or books that you feel either directly or indirectly influenced your personal style of writing?
I think almost every author did. Larry Niven gave me the sweeping vistas, the large scale science fiction view of things. Heinlein supplied the dialogue, if you will. Heinlein's dialogue tended, well, depending on which book you're reading, but his dialogue tended to be not stilted, a little more natural, stuff like that. Asimov, very much the rules-based hard science fiction.
Right.
You know what you're getting. Scalzi with his I think Heads Up. Oh, my brain's gone on me. I can't remember the title of the book, but it's the one about people who remote control computers because they're paralyzed. Somebody will come up with the title in no time, I'm sure. But books like that. There are so many books out there that inspire you and give you ideas, and everything just goes into a melting pot, and other stuff pops out.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so just a quick interlude for anyone who came in a little late. If you have comments or questions for me or for Dennis, just put them in the chat box, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, just one last question on the sci-fi. When you're writing, do you write from the perspective of how can I say this? Are you writing for a reader, or do you write with sort of a visual style in mind, so that you're as if you're almost writing a movie that happens to be on the page?
I think I tend towards the movie style. I like to tell myself that I'm a plotter, that I write to a set of notes, if you will, a pre-designed, pre-planned story. The truth is, I'm kidding myself. I'm very much a discovery writer. I start with some notes. I start with an idea and a conclusion, and I know what I want to do in each chapter, and then it all goes out the window.
All right, fair enough.
Just about every time.
All right. I hear you. All right, that was great. But now it's a time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are Attack of the Clones, Creature Feature, Quantum Leap, Dreamweaver, Music Lover, Stranger in a Strange Land, and Kick 'em in the Junk. All right, you ready?
Sure.
All right, here we go. What we got for you, and we got Strangers in a Strange Land. It seems to come up a lot. I don't know why. All right, so you've spent
You should oil your wheel.
Yes, I know. I got to get there. You spent your career writing sci-fi. What's one genre you'd like to write in that you haven't dabbled in yet, if any?
I have actually a couple of story ideas that are in the vein of Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code. Sort of in that area, but you don't tend to think of those as being or Dan Brown books as being science fiction.
Right.
They're not really. They're part adventure, they're part fantasy, they're part mystery.
Right.
But not really easily categorizable, I guess. But I do have a couple of ideas for books that would fit into whatever category you would stick Dan Brown in.
All right, fair enough. All right, popping out of your techno mode. Okay, so next up, we're going to do a new segment on the show where you're going to pick your poison. You can choose A, B, or C.
Margarita. Tequila.
Tequila. Oh.
Oh, you want A, B, or C? I'm sorry. Right. Let's go with B. Sure.
B. All right. What do we got? All right. This is. Why did I do that? I wrote the wrong thing down. Of course I did. Okay. So this is the newest one on our show. So this one is going to be All or Nothing or Steady as She Goes. So you got to bear with me on this one. All right. So I'm going to give you 2 choices. All right. I'm going to give you 2.
I still should have gone with tequila.
Yeah, you should have, but you didn't. Oh, well. So we're going to give you 2 options that are going to define the rest of your career. You can only pick one. And here are the options. Okay. Option 1. Your next book is an international bestseller. You win every award there is. You make a boatload of money. Your book gets made into a movie. The movie wins the Academy Award for Best Picture. You can ride the success forever. You will always be that guy. However, every book you write after that, and I'm talking every single one, is an absolute dumpster fire. Critically trashed, a commercial zero. You are then, from that point on, you are called a washed up hack who can no longer string even 2 cohesive sentences together. Or you keep writing as you've been going. You're generally well respected, and whatever income you've generated thus far from your writing will be about as good as it ever gets. So given these 2 choices, do you go All or Nothing or Steady as She Goes?
All or nothing, definitely. Yeah, it's not even a contest.
You're taking the money shot and I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Yeah. You'll gladly be called a washed up hack who lives in a mansion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's a scale called the Cuba scale that they talk about on Scribophile, and rates your degree of artsy versus commercial leanings. So
Right.
are you more of a commercial writer, or is it art above all else? I tend to lean more towards the commercial. Um, I like writing good books, but I want to write books that people buy. So it is about the saleability of the books, I guess you might say. Um, I don't want to go too far in that direction. I'm not like a sellout hack, but I'm always aware of uh, how sellable a book is, how sellable a story is.
All right. I'm not a sellout hack, but if I sell enough books, call me a hack all day long.
Absolutely. Cry all
Okay.
the way to the bank.
All right, fair enough. All right, that was great. We still have some time, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. All right, so what do we got here? So we got question for Dennis. Do you think that growing up an only child helped bring out the creative storyteller in you?
I don't think it's directly related. Growing up an only child probably made me more of an introvert, which made me read more, which might have led to being, being an author, but it's not a direct cause and effect thing, no.
All right, so another one. So are there any sci-fi books, that you'd put your name on? Meaning, is there a classic sci-fi book where you could say, man, I wish I'd written that one?
Oh, there are so many. There really are. And television series and stuff like that. And I look at them and I say, my God, if I had thought of that 20 years ago, it would be insanely good. iZombie, for instance. I mean, what a great idea, right? Is that Netflix? It's on Netflix. It used to be on TV, but it's now on I think Netflix. Great series, loved it. Went through the whole thing. It's a simple idea, and they managed to pull 5 seasons out of it.
Sounds good to me. All right. So another one for you. So the inspiration for the various Bobs was just to make them different voices. I assume that maybe they were like recording analog tapes so that each copy is not exactly a copy. So are there individual Bobs therefore a bit flawed?
No, I don't want to get too spoilerish here because I go into this a lot more in book 4 in Heaven's River. The initial assumption was that that they were attempting to digitally reproduce analog information, and that therefore there was some noise added on each recording. That turns out not to be the case, and that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so question for the both of us. So the question is, many writers have said that everything under the sun has already been written. Do you think that's true? What do you do to try and make your story stand out and be original?
Well, everything under the sun has been written, in that there are certain standard story styles. One of my favorites to bring up is the story of a bunch of people stuck in a limited space with a monster of some kind who's killing them off one by one, and 1 or 2 will get out in the end. Deep Star 6, Leviathan, it was the Black Hole, I think. Alien.
Yep.
Alien is one of the big ones, and that's a good example of how you can have a story that's been done so many times, and if you can bring a fresh slant on it, you can be successful.
Yeah, I mean, as for me, yeah, I mean, look, there's only so many motivations that anyone has to do anything, right? I mean,
Yep.
You've run the human gamut, and it usually comes down to the big ones. It's greed, or it's a lot of times it comes down to greed, power, jealousy, love.
Yep.
Those are the kind of the big themes and the big motivations. And look, whether you're doing, if it's space opera, you're basically saying, one group of people is either hunting or being chased down by another group of people, and then we have to battle out to figure out who's going to win, or good versus evil, right? And if you're going to blend in, like I write within my sci-fi, I do a lot of mystery. Well, mystery just means something has happened. You don't know why it's happened or who did the thing, and we're going to try to figure out who did it. So in that sense, yes, it's kind of been there. But
Yeah.
No, I think for me, I just try to bring a little bit of me and I have my own sensibilities about people, life, the universe, philosophy, humor, and whether, and I have to hope that what I have to say is at least somewhat interesting to somebody, melded into these, tropes that we kind of all seen before. I think if
Yeah.
you do, I think you can make the execution can be equally, if not more important than the concept.
I think it is more important. And it depends on the genre too. If you're talking cozy mysteries or romances or something like that, you actually cannot afford to vary too far from the formula.
That's true.
You write a romance where the boy doesn't get the girl in the end, and people are going to hate on you.
Mm-hmm.
You write a cozy mystery where you violate some rule, and death threats, right? There are certain genres of books where people expect a certain plot arc and a certain denouement, and that's what they want, and you better damn well give it to them. And as long as you make the characters interesting and the specific setting interesting for each book, martial arts movies, right? Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan movies, they're all variations on a theme. They're all practically the same story, but they vary it enough. And in the case of Jackie Chan, he's got all these stunts that make it wonderful to watch.
Right.
And people keep watching them.
Yep. All good.
Yeah.
So one more question. I didn't get a chance to ask you before. We touched upon it a little bit offline. So as a Canadian, what was and what is your take on the US?
Next question.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, I had to ask. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I've got some stuff to share, so bear with me for just a second. And all right, what do we got here? Okay. All right, so what do we got?
Heavens River.
Okay, so what's the setup? What are we looking at here?
Okay, this is the fourth book of the Bobiverse series. And once you've read through the first three, you'll realize that one of Bob's descendants, Bender, disappears unexplainedly from the scene. Bob, at the beginning of book 4, decides that he's going to go looking for Bender. It's a mystery. Bender just poof, gone. Nobody knows what happened. It could be, foul play. It could be that he just got stuck somewhere. So anyway, Bob goes looking for him, and he discovers stuff. And the whole book is about stuff and Bob's search for Bender in that particular venue. The original working title was The Search for Bender.
Okay. Well, all right. Sounds good. For anyone who hasn't checked out the Bobiverse books, I strongly recommend that you do. There's just a lot. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It's like you said, it's got a combination of space opera, military sci-fi, AI, humor. There's a little bit of something for everybody. All right. So as for me, sticking with the sci-fi theme, I'll encourage you to check out my space opera, Crossline. In this adventure, hot dog pilot Marcus Powell has been selected to test Taurus Enterprise's Crossline and its newly developed warp thrusters, which, if successful, will revolutionize space travel as we know it. But during his psychedelic jaunt across the stars, Powell is forced into a parallel universe where he finds himself at the center of a civil war he may actually have been destined for all along. He teamed up with a trigger-happy local, a zonked-out shaman, and a crafty pie maker, and a weary soldier who absolutely hates his guts. Powell must survive a cross-country mission and his own trippy vision quest long enough for his wife and young daughter to outsmart Taurus's reclusive CEO, whose own secrets may prevent Powell from ever making it back to our Earth. Crossline is an action-packed romp across time, space, and dimension that asks the question, once you cross the line, can you ever really go back? Crossline is available on Amazon and is published by Crazy 8 Press. And if you want a signed copy, you can order one directly from me. All right, folks, that's our show. I want to thank Dennis for stopping by. And I want to thank everyone who's watching at home. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and I'll see you all next week. All right. Thanks a lot, folks.
Bye.
Take care now. See you, folks. All right.